So he was fairly famous.
Okay, here we go. Who's gonna run this sucker?
Cool.
All right. Looks like item number 1 is approval of the April 24th.
We should call the meeting
Oh.
to order and the date.
Today is June 12th, 2024.
Meeting
and
of-
Meeting of Planning and Zoning,
Of the city of,
Moscow.
good
For the
job.
benefit of the
The audience.
record.
The record.
And the audience.
And now, do we move on?
Yeah, you just
to-
call a meeting to order and
Call the meeting to order, and the first action item, or first item is the approval of the April 24th, 2024 minutes. Proposed actions are to approve the minutes as presented, approve the minutes with amendments, or provide staff further direction.
It's okay to me.
Me too. Since I wasn't here, I moved to approve.
Second.
You can't, if you weren't there, how
No,
can you?
wait, sorry, I can.
Okay.
I don't have to abstain. I can actually, yeah, isn't that weird?
Because this minutes are, we went through this whole thing.
Yep.
Minutes are-
Meanwhile, back at the ranch,
And then we do roll call voting.
yeah, so you have a,
Aye.
aye,
An aye for me, I guess. Public comment? Doesn't appear to be anybody. And then
we've been ghosted.
number 3 is buffer yard requirements update review. Staff will review the potential updates to the buffer yard requirements section of the zoning code, similar to the parking lot landscaping section that the commission worked on updating a few years ago. The buffer yard section is outdated and has presented some challenges.
Yes, it is.
And the proposed actions, review the draft, update, and provide further direction if necessary.
all right, thank you. So we had gone over this probably about a year ago and had completed a little bit of work on it. And I've finally completed the draft amendment, and we'll kind of just go back through just to refresh your memory. Within the zoning code, we have landscape buffers. And so this is a matrix that has the various zoning districts. And then there's 3 types of buffers, A, B, and C. And depending upon the intensity of the zoning district and the adjacent zone of the property, there's going to be a different style of buffer. And so you look at the buffers and they range in intensity. So A has the least number of plantings currently. So 2 canopy trees, 4 understory, and 6 shrubs. This is every 100 feet. B is a little bit more. So 4 canopy, 6 understory, and 8 shrubs every 100. And then C, we don't get into very often. It's usually when there's an industrial zone involved, 2 canopy trees, 6 understory, and 12 shrubs. But it includes a 6-foot tall fence. You can see on the, just below the screen there on the bottom. And so, I mean, this looks like it's been photocopied since the 90s. I wanted to update the images, provide some better graphics. But essentially, you see the different landscape buffers, and then you go through, and it really ranges. So these are more of the residential zones here, and then you get into the commercial zones. For some reasons, we had a blank column here. BN isn't a zone. I think it refers to the motor business zone over here. So there
Yeah, I
were
was gonna
a
ask
few
that.
different errors.
You got motor business and then there's no motor business. on the
Yeah,
other
I
side.
think we've just applied it as motor business because it's, I think, a carryover.
I think
from
it's
maybe-
general business. I think that's what that,
Yeah, it's
GB.
like business neighborhood. I think that was one of the
Ah.
prior zoning codes. So I was just a remnant, not sure exactly how that got there. So I wanted to clean up, all that, but you can see, the zone of the proposed use. So if you're in an R3 zone, the adjacent property is, residential office or any other commercial, you're required to have a landscape buffer all along the property line adjacent to that use. And that's to help provide some, mitigation of some of the impacts that a higher intensity use could have on a lower intensity use, like noise, dust, pollution, things like that, headlights.
so B is the most intensive, other than the fence. B is the most,
Yeah, it's a greater intensity than the A. A is typically
Yeah.
what you see. And they also vary in depth here, so in width. So A is 12, B is 14, and C 16. But we have a statement under each one of these that says that they can be reduced to 10 feet in width when they provide irrigation. So really, it really doesn't matter to us whether they provide irrigation or not. The only thing that matters is that the plants survive. So if they, usually when they're watered for a few years and they're established, then they don't need to water them after that. And so, typically we just let people do a 10-footer with the required plantings in there, and whether or not they have irrigation, it really doesn't matter. Like I said, it just depends on whether or not they keep the plantings alive, because that's a continuing obligation to do, is to keep those. And we do, every 4 or 5 years on some of the larger projects, conduct some audits to make sure that the plantings are still there that are
That would be
required.
one of my
So,
questions.
Mhm.
And this is so old, but we probably should have in there somewhere that we'd encourage Y-scaping.
we can definitely insert that. Yeah. I think there's an intent statement when we go through the ordinance that we can probably incorporate.
Not required, encouraged.
Yeah.
So your shrubs will be water resistant. So planting sagebrush.
And I don't think that there's anything we're gonna be able to do about the weeds, because I see some of these
Yeah.
get full weeds, but,
So,
so it goes.
So this is just the updated table or the matrix. So I've just gone through, and this is kind of the standard format as we've gone through and updated tables and inserted tables in the zoning code. I've just used this standard format, alternating kind of the shading, and then eliminated the blank column, fixed motor business. And then we had a couple other zones that weren't included. Urban mixed commercial was created about 2010, I believe. As part of, it's only in Legacy Crossing area, but that nonetheless is still a zoning district that was added. So updated it there, and then the U zone. Just wanted to include it, even though we don't require any buffers on university zone property. And then went through and updated the type A, B, C
It's a waiver
type
traffic.
buffers, but yeah. So this is similar. So we had some landscaping diagrams that were included in the parking lot landscaping. So this is similar to what was included there. But yeah, put that together to better understand, better visualize exactly what is required on there. And eliminated, just put them as a standard 10 feet in width instead of the varying, width depending upon the intensity of the buffer.
So Mike, where does it say that we have, that it has to be maintained, or not maintained, but
yeah,
where we used to say, okay, it had to have, or if it had drip irrigation or what kind of irrigation it was, you could reduce it. But where does it say that they're responsible for maintaining the health of the
I'll have to go back and look through the zoning code. I know that I want to say it's either in the parking lot landscaping portion that says it's a continuing obligation, but it could be in another area. If it's in the other area that covers the entire zoning code, then we're
Then
fine.
we're okay.
But I'll have to go back and check. And then, if it's just in the landscape section in the parking lot standards, then we'd have to add that here just to
It
make
might,
sure.
even if it was we reiterated the issue, it might be appropriate. So, okay,
Yeah.
all right, good.
how wide is the one at the mall?
You're referring to adjacent to
Between-
Pullman Highway there?
Yep. Because you got the sidewalk, you got the tree strip, and you've got the parking. I was just
Well,
wondering,
yeah, it'd only be required to be 10.
Well,
but
I
it's,
just wanted to know,
the width of that.
have a picture in my mind.
I'd probably say that that's, maybe 20 feet there.
I'd say 20 as well. That's just.
Yeah, it's pretty good.
Yeah.
I like it.
Yeah, that was a requirement because I believe just to the south is a R4. There's like a strip of the old railroad right away that for some reason or the other is zoned residential
South?
across Pullman Highway to the south.
Oh, yeah. Yes,
That's
yes.
zone residential?
It is, yeah. It's just a remnant, like a strip for
Yeah.
some
Huh,
reason.
interesting.
It was zoned. unsure how it got that way.
So if you have R4 in a motor business zone, do you need to have a buffer between the R4 apartment building and the motor business next door?
How big?
You do, yeah. So you just go into the matrix, and so you're, whatever the proposed use is, so it's in the R4 zone, you go down to motor business, it'd be a B
But a
buffer.
B,
Yeah, so then you just
a B
apply.
zone.
Yeah, because I'm looking at the Lily thing, or the Asbury thing, which has a sidewalk as it's between the building and the next lot is a sidewalk. That's it.
Oh, I'm talking about the almond, you're talking about the alley off of Almond in the back, places in the back? I don't know. which
The
one
one's
you're
behind the tall,
talking- That's one
skinny
on Lily.
thing.
You want a picture?
between-
I got a picture of it.
Oh, I do too. I took pictures between that and the, and what's interesting is it looks so out of place because it's legally tall enough. But because if you have a short, there are other apartments, but if they have like where the laundromat is, it's got the 3-story apartment next door, but it's taller, the apartment's taller and looking over the business, so it doesn't seem as big as it is. Anyway, I was just wondering about.
I wondered a lot of things about that one.
Anyway,
It looks like trees and toner stacked on top of it.
So this is the section on buffer yard requirements. We go through a purpose statement, establishing standard buffer yard requirements to provide visual buffer between uses of different intensity, reduce erosion, stormwater runoff, protect property values, and to eliminate potential land use conflicts by mitigating adverse impacts from dust, odor, litter, noise, glare, lights, signs, buildings, and parking areas. Buffer yards required shall be provided in accordance with the provisions of this section whenever any use, development, or modification to use or development is being reviewed by the zoning code. And then it just essentially states table of required buffer yards and references back to table 1. And then figure 2 as far as the buffer yard standards. And then states this buffer yard standards section really vary on the intensity of both the zoning district of the proposed use and originally states its neighbors. I think it'd be more appropriate to say the zoning district of the adjacent property. I think it's the proper terminology there. And then it states 3 standards, the A, B, and C, accommodating a broad range of buffer yard needs. And then the location shall be located on the perimeter of the lot or parcel upon which the development occurs and shall extend from lot line to lot line, or in an alternative location if the applicant demonstrates that it will provide an equivalent or superior buffering effect between uses. Buffer yards should not be located on any portion of a public or private street, dedicated right-of-way, or vision triangle. So really, that's the only change that we're recommending in these first A through E. And then we get to kind of a minimum plant size. I really just duplicated what we had in the land, since we visited this within the last 5 years, the parking lot standard. So canopy, the standard requirement upon planting is 1.5-inch caliper. Understory, we don't reference that in the parking lot standard. So I just did a little research, and it appears that the standard for understory is about 1.25 caliper upon planting. And then the shrubs depends on perennial, deciduous, or evergreen. But I think the industry standard from, researching this in our parking lot standards is 1 gallon in size for perennial and at least 2 gallons in size for deciduous or evergreen. So making those changes there. And then there's existing vegetation section, just talks about that you can use the existing vegetation, maybe use to achieve or satisfy the requirements of the section. And fences and berms, fence provided to meet the requirements of a type C buffer shall be solid, view obstructing, and constructed of natural materials and or masonry, shall be at least 6 feet in height. So that's referring to the type C buffer. If a landscape berm of at least 3 feet in height is provided in a B buffer yard, plantings provided at the B or at the A buffer yard level will satisfy the buffer yard requirements. If a landscape berm of at least 3 feet in height is provided in a C buffer yard, no fencing shall be required. This usually doesn't come into play. We had it come into play at the MZ project when they originally constructed I think I have an image here, but they're essentially an industrial zone, even though it's not really an industrial use. And they're adjacent to R4 on the west. And they're required to do a type C buffer. And you can imagine, a 6-foot tall fence all along, I think it's Almond
Yeah.
Street there. Wouldn't be very appeasing, the neighbors just looking at that. And so they chose to, and it was great, they chose to do the 3-foot berm instead of the 6-foot tall fence.
They have
And it
more of a
looks-
setback.
yeah.
They're more setback. They're not right on the street or right on the sidewalk. So because they're set back and they've got
Yeah. a little bit
streets on
wider.
either side of them,
Yeah.
that helps.
Yep. And then we have an arterial street section. So if there's an arterial that separates the incompatible uses, so if a C buffer yard is required, then normally a B buffer yard would satisfy that. If a B is required, then an A would satisfy that. So it allows you to reduce. But I always thought it was odd that, if you had an A, we allowed you to reduce all the rest of the buffer yards. But if you had an A, then it was just an A. And so we thought that, the same number of plantings, but to be able to reduce the width to 5 feet. Usually, there's been a few projects where this has become an issue, and the 10 feet just took up a little bit too much room. They had a parking lot there. And so able to reduce it to 5 seemed appropriate in those circumstances.
How about for tree health?
Yeah, I mean, it's 3 feet for parking lot standards, and so they don't have an issue with that. And so 5 feet should be, more than adequate. Preparation of a buffer yard plan. So this is just stating that when buffering is required, a plan needs to be submitted, incorporated in the site plan, showing the location, height, size, and types of plantings and fences and berms. And then I just eliminated and irrigation systems, because really that's their choice if they put that in or not. And then this is a section that we added, and I can talk a little bit about this. Mainly, there's been a few different projects where we've just had not a logical zoning configuration of the property or the surrounding area. And we've been in, just those circumstances where we've had to allow some waivers just because it hadn't made sense requiring a buffer in certain locations. And so just wanted to codify this just to say that in circumstances where the proposed use of the property and existing use of adjacent property of similar intensity and compatibility, the zoning administrator shall be permitted to allow deviations in buffer yard standards, including the elimination of the buffer yard if deemed appropriate. And so, you could have, I think probably the MZ projects is a good example here. They built a 4-story office building. You have residential here to the west, a portion of St. John that's, I think, intended to be demolished. It hasn't been yet. A parking lot that was ended up being constructed here to the east for that project. You got the recycling center here to the north. So really, probably the least impact other than the residential of, the surrounding area as far as commercial. But it's a remnant, it's that historical agricultural corridor that's still zoned industrial. When they developed the condo project here, they rezoned that to R4 and neighborhood business, I think, for the corner lot. But this was never rezoned. Actually, Gropp across the street is still zoned industrial as well. But yeah, it's just a result of just the agricultural railroad corridor that went through this area and has never been rezoned. Well, the professional office use is allowed in industrial, so there's really no reason to change the zone when they wanted to construct the building. So they just left it as is, but it did affect them as far as the landscape buffers. And you can see, obviously R4 required the type C, but industrial adjacent to motor business still required, 2 really intense commercial zones and required a type A buffer between those 2 uses, which in the matrix, that's one of the, buffers that I've eliminated. I don't know that you have industrial adjacent to motor business. I don't think there should be a buffer between the two zones. And so what happened was, this is,
It softens
the
it.
almond. So this is an example of the 3-foot berm instead of the 6-foot tall fence that would originally have, extended all the way down the street. So yeah, I mean, it turned out, I think it worked well in that situation. It provides, it's just tall enough to block all the headlights or most of the headlights from the vehicles in the parking lot. And so I think that worked really well. The A Street, I think we allowed a little bit of reduction in width for that one. But really, as you shift to Jackson Street, I mean, this is more of an urban environment and didn't feel it was appropriate that you need a type A buffer on this side. You want that building presence right up against the street and have that, really walkable feel, transitioning to more of a central business feel in this area. And so, that's one of those circumstances where I think you need that in the code to be able to provide that flexibility of not allowing it. And so that's really the intent there. Then you have other circumstances. This is the animal clinic on Logan and Troy Road. This was the RV dealership over here. It's now Omega Electric, but I think they still have some limited storage and propane refills over there. But yeah, you look at the zoning configuration. I mean, this is really, we've got motor business, their residential office. Obviously there's buffers required between the other residential zones to the east and to the north, which they've included as, they're currently underway in a project for an expansion. But you look across the street, residential office and motor business, they require a buffer there. But just because of the configuration of the zone, I mean, it's really the pathway and Paradise Creek, which is directly across the street. So you're really not, achieving much with that.
And the highway
with
itself
that
is kind of
buffer
a buffer.
in the highway, right? So, it's kind of these examples that we run into where it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to have a buffer, or at least maybe allow a reduction in the width and be able to accommodate it. And so it's just those that over the years have just been in the back of our minds as trying to fix. So yeah, I mean that's pretty simple amendment, but that's pretty much it. But
So Mike, on the fences and berms, where it talks about where you see 6 feet, I'm trying to remember back when we were doing the storage area amendment. Isn't our fence height higher than 6 feet? And does that conflict with this at all?
no, the maximum height is 6 feet for fences.
Even for the storage area?
Yeah.
Doesn't have to?
Yeah.
Okay, I couldn't remember.
Yeah, it was the building height that needed to be of a certain height. But there was when RVs were included as part of the storage.
Okay.
Type of thing. But yeah, we do allow fences to go higher than 6, but it has to be for like schools and other institutional. So you have like the backstop for a baseball, play fields, things like that. But yeah, the standard is 6.
Okay.
Yeah,
Mike,
you don't want the ball coming through your front window.
No, I think,
here's a question, an odd thing that's just rolling around in my mind. I'm thinking about PUDs and whatever might be next to a PUD. And what's, I'm not, my old mind can't say the name, but we a few weeks ago, we did that little development, the little PUD up on,
Wild Rose Court.
Off of Wild Rose.
yeah. And you wonder about whether that situation between these new little homes and these tall things next door, it's been on my mind because City Council, there was some debate at City Council. They weren't as willing to buckle under as we did. We sort of said, well, we're sorry about this, but and so we were pretty much unanimous. But I noticed, I wasn't at the meeting, but I noticed that there were a couple of council members, you probably would recall. And so that's left it on my mind, just thinking about it. And one wonders if it had been an odious thing to have had some kind of a buffer between the PUD if one of these buffers with some trees might have,
I don't think it was the trees that was the issue. I think it was the height.
well, of course, it was
And
a
a tree
height.
wouldn't
But
help.
looking at a tree with some tall thing behind it is a different view than just looking at the thing itself. In other words, that's what these buffers are all about. If we plant a tree in the buffer, it softens the view. And the actual zoning was not dissimilar, but with the PUD. And I just, began to make me think, would this be a place where staff might can say, well, okay, we're doing this creative PUD. Maybe we could think about a way to soften the blow to these folks that are, that didn't realize they were going to have a 2.5-story thing in their backyard. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I mean, it's always an option to put a condition on the PUD that they be, a landscape buffer be installed. But, the height of that PUD was the same height allowed within the zone that's directly adjacent to it. So, I mean, it wasn't any taller. I mean, the height of those were 28 feet
No, I
average.
understand.
Yeah, and you
It
gotta,
just happens that the people that had the little houses didn't build a 34-foot house. They only built a 16-foot one. And so they were feeling,
well, one of them's 30. There's another one that's just single story, but the other one over there is 30.
there are within a spit of that area, there are some fairly tall buildings. It just, I've just,
You also have to, you also have to consider the new development, that the yard had a 13-foot setback. And if you put in some more trees, your yard turns into 10 feet maybe or something. So I think that you could have some discretion to that, but it's a good point, the PUDs.
anyway, it's just a thought. We don't run into PUDs.
What I guess you're suggesting is the possibility that it would be good to have some verbiage in the PUD ordinance indicating that in certain circumstances,
Should there be-
buffers could be a tactic, appropriate tactic. And I don't believe it's in the PUD ordinance
Yeah,
at the moment.
Mike, in the reason statement for PUD, does it say compatible with the neighborhood?
And so we start parsing compatible. What is compatible?
And that's when you put the condition of your tree.
Right.
Yeah.
But I think in my own case, I didn't plant them, but 60 years ago, somebody planted a row of Colorado blue spruce, vertical blue spruce along the alley. Well, duh. That means that while we can look between the trees and see the white Harlem over there, it clearly softens the blow. But Joyce and I were arguing about it today because she watches windows in the apartments. I wonder who lives there now, and why didn't they open their window? And so, but I'm looking through the tree because I'm going, well, the tree branches are there. So there's no doubt that row of trees has probably enhanced our lives considerably. When you buy into a place and you didn't build it, you just take it the way it is. But that's exactly the kind of an issue that I'm talking about, where it would just soften those
Some of it have to be variable or up to the zone administrator because those conditions, sometimes it's gonna have a 20-foot setback, sometimes it's gonna
Right.
be 13.
Well,
So,
that's
you know,
why,
sometimes it
whether
would be
there
less
could
because
be
it's a-
literature in a PUD that give you the opportunity to see an issue. I don't think, I understand how we made the decision, but I've kind of scampered around up in that neighborhood for the last year or two, just for fun. And, you know, you realize how willy-nilly the city grows when it grows outside the city limits. And stuff just happens, and the next thing you know, you've got a little lane and you don't have any paving and you don't have a sidewalk. Oh, what's that? I've never heard of it. And then the city grows, and of course, it's this weird place.
Yeah. It's
Well, anyway,
kind of
it's something that.
So, yeah.
For some reason, I've gone out there several times to just think about those couple of people that have these houses. Thought this was what our life was going to be, and then lo and behold, it didn't turn out to be quite that way.
So I thought of something about that one afterwards. There's the houses behind that were already there had 15 feet setback from their house to the property line. So that was 15 feet. And then they kept saying, and then we have a building. You don't just have a building, you have another 13 feet.
Yeah.
So it's 28 feet to the building, which isn't a lot, but it's better than 15. And
Yeah.
I wish we would have thought of it because I think it might have been helpful to say, no, it's 28 feet between you and the building.
And they have a little bit, yeah, I mean, it's 20 for the typical setback. So
Right.
theirs is 20 and then the PUD was 15.
Well,
So
the
they
guys,
have
the guys
30
said, I think
35.
both of them said they had 15.
Yeah, so it should be 35 is what they would have between buildings, you know.
Which is almost the length of almost the width of the street.
Yeah, I mean, a standard setback would be 40. This is just 35. So, I mean, it's not that much difference there.
It just might have softened the blow a little bit. Somebody had thought to say, because I didn't think of it. It's more than 15 feet.
And there's lots of room for the owners to plant some trees.
Yeah.
Well, I appreciate the revision of the mimeograph version. This is much clearer.
Yeah, isn't it just amazing to think of how technology has changed our lives? I mean, I just go back to my school days at the university when there weren't copy machines.
when the university
There actually was a university in my, you think I'm older than the university, but just a few days. And just to go back and look at that stuff that we had to read, and if there were a thing called a mimeograph.
That's what I'm going to say. I wonder if nowadays people would say, oh, I got cancer from the fumes of a mimeo machine.
It's strong. I think I remember from the parking lot and stuff, we had in there to encourage Y-scaping as water conservation and pollinator habitat.
Yeah, I was,
That's important to me. I want it in there.
yeah, that was on my mind. I think we could probably insert it in that subsection J. Just pretty much saying that it needs to show and then have a sentence at the end of that that mimics what we have in the landscape. I think that's probably, instead of creating a new section, just
Sure. Oh, yeah,
tacking it on to
Yeah. that's
the
fine.
buffer yard plan requirements, just say it's Y-scaping is encouraged, so.
Yeah, you don't want them stealing a saguaro cactus,
Well, no,
putting it
no,
there.
but I think we have plenty of.
Also, the city did declare National Pollinator Month. We're part of that this month, so
Right.
it speaks to your concerns.
So, and maybe the ones that are next to the
Recreation.
highway, the tall grasses or something might work for them.
Yeah,
And it's
so
next to a highway, so they're looking at salt or sands and heat and all that kind of stuff.
Lucky you don't have to worry about that.
So I'll add
No, I guess I
that
don't.
sentence to the subsection J, and then we comfortable with scheduling for public hearing?
Perfect.
Does that sound good?
Good job.
Yes.
Thank you, Mike, for all your hard work.
Yeah. And that's all I have on this.
All right.
What happened to the map, Michael?
I don't know if we're getting a new one or not. I think the.
You don't know what's going on in City Hall? Wow, you
Talk to the
live way
mayor.
over
Ask the
there
mayor.
on the other side of
Yeah.
town.
I think we have the old one in our office downstairs,
Right. I
but
think
yeah, if you recall, I think it turned a shade of.
Yeah,
green
it
or
is-
beige
it
or
is
something,
color
so
a little
Yeah, I think they had.
Plus,
a
he
new
might
one
reflect, the new one might reflect the actual city.
I'd like a new one,
Yeah.
in case anyone asks.
Yeah,
There's somebody
okay.
on
All right.
P&Z
I'll
that
pass
wants
that
a new one.
Yeah,
So would the public hearing be the next meeting, do you think, or could we do it then?
oh, you have to publish it.
Yeah.
Oh,
It probably won't be, yeah,
The-
it's 15
be in
days,
July
so that'll be
sometime,
next,
yeah.
yeah. Yeah, we'll just have to look at the schedule. I don't know that we have anything for the next meeting, so we'll probably look at canceling that.
Okay,
oh,
that's always such an upsetting thing.
I bet. Yeah.
Especially in the summer.
Yeah.
Next up is Transportation Commission meeting report.
And that's easy because I haven't checked on it. Is there a meeting tomorrow? Okay, so there's, the next meeting will be in July, I guess. And the last meeting was canceled, so I don't have any report on that.
So you'll be transported later.
Joel, do you guys deal with stop signs at transportation?
We can.
I have
What's your issue?
my issue is Third and Hayes.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I am dumbfounded that we haven't had a four-way stop there. I'd say 40% of the people who come to that intersection think it will be a four-way stop. And so they stop, and then there's somebody behind them in a big truck blasting on it who's been through the intersection. And it seems to me with the number of children and dogs everywhere crossing the street into the park that we really need. So I'm going to go talk to Bill, but I would talk to you.
I would think the backup on Hayes, because it's such a through route, I think the backup on Hayes would be really interesting. I mean, it might be a serious problem because people use that to get to Sixth. It's for
I
between D and
understand,
Sixth,
but
they
it's a
use that.
four-way stop at Blaine and Sixth, and we seem to survive it.
I would agree.
And there aren't children.
The urge.
Children playing everywhere at Sixth and Blaine. But I mean, I go through Sixth and Blaine
Well,
every day, 5 times.
Six goes through, well, now Third goes through. I think before, when Third was total dead end. I know people don't drive all the way through Six, but now that there's the subdivision of Third crossing Mountain View, yes, you'd have more people crossing.
they should have looked at that when they did the Third Street, all the work on Third Street. So you might want to reference that.
Yeah, I agree that there are many people who have the urge to stop there, and they do. There was somebody I saw, I go through it regularly, and I have been known to stop there. The urge to stop is,
Well, that's good.
it's a,
Well, it is.
yeah,
and-
it just
and,
seems reasonable.
as the spring and early summer comes on and we're working in the yard, you just cannot believe the number, and we haven't had an accident for a couple of years, but the anger that is there is surprising. Just because people do as you say, they think, oh, it's a four-way stop, of course. And then there's this guy in a beautiful little F-150.
He's got to get over
Well,
himself.
fortunately,
What's that?
I said, he's got to get over himself. People have to develop patience, you know, that is just,
The guys in the 150?
yeah,
Well, you should.
yeah.
I don't think they do.
You know, what's interesting is remember the intersection of First and Main changed many times. It was first a stop sign on Main, and then they had that curve when they were, and then now the stop sign is on First, but many people stop on Main. They stop. I'll be waiting, and I can just wait for people to go by. And I'm not even in the crosswalk or anything, I'm just in, but they'll stop, because we used to stop there till that tire went through the front of the bank.
You know, in a way, the four-way at Third and Hayes, I think would actually benefit traffic moving, because the other day I was northbound on Hayes making the turn onto Third, and there was probably 5 cars lined up on Third Street waiting, and every time somebody would come, they just kept stacked up. But if you moved every other one, you're gonna move more cars through
I
that
think,
intersection.
Because I have that exact experience on both 6th and Blaine and White Avenue and Blaine. Both of those are heavily trafficked streets. And we being all those of us who are driving, seem to really get it, because you don't have to debate whether somebody did or didn't stop. Everybody stops, and boom, boom, boom,
Yeah.
and it really works. And I think that that's what's causing a bit of the confusion on Third and Hayes, is that it isn't what you think it's going to be. Anyway, it's
fortunately, all of my vehicles are bright red, so people watch out for me.
Okay,
You're doing something with this?
gosh, I'm reading.
I move that we adjourn.
I just asked a question.
Yeah, I think you just acknowledged that we received another copy of the,
And if maybe you thought something was interesting, we could bring it up next time.
Yeah.
Something was interesting.
okay.
Upcoming events, meetings, the next Planning and Zoning Commission regular meeting is scheduled for June 26th. Sounds like that may
probably likely canceled. you know.
canceled. And then a motion to adjourn.
It doesn't require a motion.
You can just-
You can
yeah.
declare
Is
it.
there a gavel? I declare that we adjourn.
Yeah, there you go.